Imagine discovering two ancient books filled with epic tales of resistance, miraculous victories, and unwavering faith, books so powerful they've been hidden or excluded from many Bibles. These are the first and second books of Maccabees, where faith clashes with empire, and ordinary people become extraordinary heroes. Welcome to Mystical Bible Tales, where we delve into the hidden stories of the Bible and uncover their profound lessons for today. In this episode, we'll explore the books of Maccabees, not just as historical texts, but as a testament to the unyielding spirit of those who stood firm in their beliefs, even when faced with death. But here's the question: why were these books left out of many Christian Bibles? What secrets do they hold, and why have they been ignored for centuries? Today, we'll answer those questions and take you deep into the heart of these incredible stories. Before we begin, I need your help. If you're passionate about uncovering the truths of ancient history and faith, hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. It's the best way to stay connected and support our journey into these fascinating topics. Don't forget to give this video a like if you're as excited as I am to dive into the books of Maccabees. Now, let's unravel the hidden history of the Maccabees, where faith met resistance, and miracles reshaped the destiny of a people. 2. Exploring the content of 1 Maccabees, Faith Under Fire. 2.1 Historical context, oppression, and religious assimilation. The story of 1 Maccabees begins in a period of intense religious and cultural conflict. The Seleucid Empire, which controlled much of the eastern Mediterranean in the 2nd century BCE, sought to forcefully assimilate the Jewish people into Greek customs and religious practices. This was part of a broader campaign of Hellenization, an effort to spread Greek culture, language, and religion across the territories they ruled. The Seleucid king Antiochus for Epiphanes played a crucial role in this religious persecution. Antiochus aimed to solidify his power by unifying the diverse peoples within his empire under a single cultural and religious system. To achieve this, he imposed harsh decrees on the Jewish population, attempting to abolish their sacred customs and practices. One of the most significant acts of oppression occurred when Antiochus banned Jewish rituals such as circumcision, the observance of the Sabbath, and the reading of the Torah. His greatest offense was to demand that Jews abandon their worship of the God of Israel and instead bow down to the Greek gods, most notably the god Zeus. In an act of sacrilege, Antiochus ordered the erection of a statue of Zeus inside the Temple of Jerusalem. This was not just a symbolic gesture, it was a deliberate and profane act of desecration. The sacred altar in the temple was used for sacrifices to Zeus, and pigs, which were considered unclean by Jewish law, were sacrificed on it. This desecration of the temple and the imposition of pagan worship infuriated the Jewish people, leading to widespread unrest. Many Jews, particularly the faithful, saw these actions as an outright attack on their religious identity and covenant with God. The Temple of Jerusalem, which had been the center of Jewish worship and a symbol of their relationship with God, was now defiled by foreign practices. This profound sacrilege was not just a matter of religious difference, it was seen as a threat to the very survival of the Jewish people and their heritage. The reactions of the Jewish community were mixed. Some chose to assimilate, adopting Greek customs and religion to avoid conflict and survive under the harsh rule of Antiochus. Others, however, were unwilling to compromise their faith and were deeply moved by the desecration of the temple. For them, the situation was no longer just about politics, it was a matter of spiritual survival. 1 Maccabees records the words of Mattathias, a priest from the town of Modi'in, who led the resistance against the Seleucid imposition. He and his sons were among those who refused to obey the king's orders. The refusal of Mattathias to offer a sacrifice to Zeus was the spark that ignited the Maccabean Revolt, setting the stage for a larger struggle for Jewish religious freedom. The oppression described in 1 Maccabees wasn't just about external control, it also touched on the internal battle for Jewish identity. The Seleucid rulers wanted to eliminate the distinctive practices of Judaism, especially its religious and cultural symbols, such as the temple and the law. This was not an isolated incident, but part of a larger pattern of forced assimilation that had affected many other cultures under the reign of the Seleucid Empire. In understanding this historical backdrop, it's important to recognize the immense sacrifice the Jewish people made to maintain their identity in the face of such brutal pressure. The religious freedom they fought for was not just about the ability to perform rituals or follow customs, it was about the right to honor God in a way that was true to their beliefs. Conclusion: the oppressive rule of Antiochus IV and the forced imposition of Hellenistic practices upon the Jewish people created a volatile situation that would eventually lead to the Maccabean Revolt. This context is crucial for understanding the larger narrative of the 1 Maccabees, where faith, identity, and resistance to assimilation take center stage. 2.2. The Maccabean Revolt, a simple act sparks a revolution. The Maccabean Revolt, as chronicled in 1 Maccabees, begins with a single, powerful act of resistance. This act, carried out by a priest named Mattathias, ignited a movement that would go on to reclaim Jewish religious freedom and restore the desecrated temple in Jerusalem. This section of the story highlights how a seemingly simple, yet deeply significant decision led to a larger rebellion against the oppressive rule of the Seleucid Empire. Mattathias, a priest from the town of Modi'in, is one of the central figures in the Maccabean Revolt. The revolt began in response to the harsh decrees of King Antiochus for Epiphanes, who sought to force the Jewish people to abandon their faith and embrace the pagan practices of the Greek Empire. In one particular incident, the king sent officers to Modi'in to enforce a pagan sacrifice to Zeus. Mattathias, deeply offended by the defilement of the Jewish faith, stood in defiance of the king's officers. According to 1 Maccabees 2:15-20, when one of the Jews in Modi'in stepped forward to offer a sacrifice to Zeus, Mattathias was filled with rage. He cried out, "Though all the nations that are under the king's dominion obey him and have forsaken the religion of their ancestors and consent to the king's orders, yet I and my sons and my brothers will walk in the covenant of our ancestors." 1 Maccabees 2:19. In a moment of righteous anger, Mattathias, in a dramatic and decisive act, killed the apostate Jew and the king's officer who had been overseeing the sacrifice. 1 Maccabees 2:24. This moment marked the beginning of the Maccabean Revolt, a call to arms against the tyrannical rule of Antiochus IV. Mattathias' refusal to submit, even at the cost of his own life, served as a powerful statement about his unwavering commitment to the Jewish faith. His action was not just about protecting Jewish practices, but about defending the very identity of the Jewish people. In a sense, Mattathias became a symbol of resistance to foreign oppression and religious assimilation. After this dramatic act of defiance, Mattathias fled with his sons and other loyal Jews to the mountains of Judah, where they began to organize a resistance. The revolt was no longer an isolated act of rebellion, it had transformed into a widespread movement that inspired many Jews to take up arms in defense of their faith. After the death of Mattathias, his son Judas Maccabee took on the leadership of the revolt. Judas, known as the Hammer, would become one of the most celebrated military leaders in Jewish history. His military leadership and courage were instrumental in the success of the Maccabean Revolt. His leadership qualities were founded on a blend of strategic brilliance, unyielding faith, and a commitment to freedom for his people. One of the key elements that allowed the Maccabees to triumph against the Seleucid forces was their strong belief in God and their faith that he would protect them. The 1 Maccabees 3:18-19 recounts an important battle in which Judas and his forces faced a much larger army. As Judas prepared for battle, he encouraged his soldiers, saying, "It is better to die in battle than to see the misfortunes of our nation and the sanctuary." His words were a reminder that the battle they were fighting was not only for their freedom, but for the honor of God. In the face of overwhelming odds, Judas led the Maccabees to a decisive victory. One of the most significant battles in this early phase of the revolt occurred in Beth Zur, where the Maccabean forces, despite being outnumbered, decisively defeated the Seleucid army. This victory is often seen as a turning point in the revolt, and it was a clear sign that, although the Maccabees were few in number, they had the support of divine intervention. According to 1 Maccabees 3:24-25, then Judas and his brothers said, "Now that our enemies have been defeated, let us go up to Jerusalem and purify the sanctuary." The victories of Judas Maccabee and his soldiers were not only about military success, but also about the restoration of Jewish pride and identity. Judas and his brothers were able to liberate Jerusalem and reclaim the temple, which had been desecrated under Antiochus IV. They purified the altar and re-established proper worship, celebrating the rededication of the temple, an event that is commemorated every year in the Jewish festival of Hanukkah. Judas Maccabee's leadership was a blend of military genius and spiritual resolve. His ability to inspire his troops and lead them to victory against a larger and more powerful enemy was a testament to his strategic brilliance. However, Judah's strength was also deeply rooted in his unshakable faith in God, which gave him the courage to fight against the Seleucids, despite their overwhelming power. The Maccabean Revolt, ignited by Mattathias' defiance and propelled forward by the leadership of Judas Maccabee, marked a significant moment in Jewish history. The revolt not only restored the Jewish people's freedom, but also reasserted their religious and cultural identity. It demonstrated the power of faith and determination in the face of oppression and set an example for future generations about the importance of standing up for what is right, even against seemingly insurmountable odds. Through these early stages of the Maccabean Revolt, the Jewish people learned that their faith, their identity, and their commitment to justice could not be easily crushed. The courage of Mattathias and Judas Maccabee left an enduring legacy, and their story continues to inspire people of faith to this day. In conclusion, the Maccabean Revolt was not simply a military conflict, it was a battle for religious freedom, identity, and the right to worship God in the way that was true to the Jewish tradition. The revolt began with the defiance of one man, but it grew into a revolution that would change the course of Jewish history. 2.3. The miracles in battle, faith against overwhelming odds. In the account of the Maccabean Revolt, particularly in 1 Maccabees, the battles fought by the Jewish rebels, under the leadership of Judas Maccabee, are not merely military engagements. They are also stories of divine intervention, where faith in God plays a central role in securing victories against seemingly insurmountable odds. The Maccabees' belief in God's protection and the miracles that occurred during these battles are powerful reminders of the strength that faith can provide in the most desperate of circumstances. The Maccabean Revolt began as a small, grassroots rebellion led by a priest's family against the overwhelming military force of the Seleucid Empire. The Maccabees, though vastly outnumbered, maintained their resolve in the face of powerful armies. This struggle is best seen in the battles at Beth Zur and Emmors, where the Jewish forces, led by Judas Maccabee, defeated much larger Seleucid armies. One of the key reasons for the Maccabees' success in these improbable victories was their unwavering faith in God. 1 Maccabees 3:18-19 illustrates the mindset of the Maccabees as they prepared for battle. We are fighting for our lives and our laws. Do not be afraid of the numbers of the enemy. Judas Maccabee's words highlight the central belief that God would guide and protect them, even against a vastly superior force. In the Battle of Beth Zur, the Seleucid army, led by General Nicanor, was much larger and better equipped than the Maccabean forces. However, Judas and his soldiers were encouraged by the faith that God would intervene on their behalf. The victory at Beth Zur was not just the result of military strategy or tactical brilliance, it was seen by the Jews as a miraculous act of divine intervention. After the battle, the Maccabees attributed their success to God's guidance and protection. 1 Maccabees 4:30-34 accounts, when they saw the great strength of the enemy and their overwhelming numbers, they trusted in the Lord and prayed to him. The Maccabees emerged victorious, and the battle became a symbol of God's power to protect the faithful, even against overwhelming adversaries. Another important example of divine intervention is seen in the Battle of Emmors, where the Maccabees, once again outnumbered, faced off against a powerful Seleucid force. According to 1 Maccabees 4:6-15, Judas Maccabee was undaunted by the challenge. Before the battle, Judas reminded his soldiers of the importance of trusting in God and not being afraid of their enemies, saying, "For it is not the size of the army that matters, but the power of God who fights on our behalf." 1 Maccabees 4:8. The Maccabees, relying on their faith and the strength that came from believing in God's protection, won the battle at Emmors against a much larger Seleucid army. The Battle of Emmors is particularly significant because it showcases how the Maccabees relied on divine strength rather than sheer numbers or military prowess. In this conflict, the miracle wasn't just about God granting them victory, it was about providing them with the strength to stand firm and fight when the situation seemed hopeless. Like the ancient Israelites in times of adversity, the Maccabees believed that victory came not from human strength, but from God's intervention. The story of the Maccabean Revolt, particularly these miraculous victories, parallels many stories from the Hebrew scriptures that emphasize the power of faith in overcoming seemingly insurmountable challenges. One of the most famous examples from the Bible is the story of Gideon in the Book of Judges. In Judges 7, Gideon, like the Maccabees, led a small army of Israelites against a far superior enemy, the Midianites. God instructed Gideon to reduce his army significantly, telling him, "The army is still too large, and I will deliver Midian into your hands." Judges 7 verse 4. God's strategy was unconventional. Gideon's army was reduced to just 300 men, while the Midianite forces numbered in the thousands. Despite this, God gave Gideon a miraculous victory, using a strategy that involved sounding trumpets and breaking jars to create confusion and fear in the enemy camp. The Israelites did not need strength in numbers, they needed faith in God's power to deliver them. Similarly, the Maccabees' faith in God's providence in the midst of battle mirrors Gideon's reliance on God's strength rather than military might. The battle at Emos and the victory at Beth-zur are a testament to the faith and trust that the Maccabees placed in God, believing that it was God's will that they win, not their physical strength alone. Another comparison can be made with the story of David and Goliath from 1 Samuel 17. David, a young shepherd, faced the giant warrior Goliath, who was armed with superior weaponry and size. Despite the overwhelming odds, David trusted in God and went into battle armed only with a slingshot. David's faith was rewarded when he struck Goliath down, defeating the Philistine giant. Much like David, the Maccabees fought against seemingly insurmountable odds, but their faith in God's will made them victorious. For the Maccabees, these battles were not merely about achieving military victory, they were signs of God's presence and favor. The Maccabees saw their victories as miracles. For them, each victory was a sign that God was actively involved in their struggle, showing his faithfulness to his covenant with Israel. The miracles during the battle served as divine affirmations that their cause was just, that their faith was the foundation of their strength, and that God was with them every step of the way. These stories have become not just historical accounts, but spiritual lessons for generations to come, reminding people that with faith and trust in God, no challenge is too great. In conclusion, the miracles that occurred during the Maccabean Revolt are more than just miraculous events, they are a reflection of the profound power of faith. The victories at Beth-zur and Emos were not won through human strength alone, but through the intervention of God, who protected and guided the Maccabees because of their devotion and belief in him. Like the stories of Gideon and David, the Maccabees remind us that with God on our side, no challenge is insurmountable. These miracles underscore the timeless message that faith can move mountains, and that no matter the odds, the righteous will be upheld by divine power. 3. Exploring the content of 2 Maccabees, faith in the face of martyrdom. 3.1 Differences from 1 Maccabees. While both 1 and 2 Maccabees tell the story of the Maccabean Revolt, there are significant differences in their tone, focus, and theological message. 2 Maccabees is not merely a historical account, it is a deeply spiritual and religious work, emphasizing the themes of resurrection, divine justice, and the reward of martyrdom. One of the most notable differences between the 2 books is the way 2 Maccabees presents the struggles of the Jewish people. Unlike 1 Maccabees, which focuses heavily on the military victories and the political triumphs of the Maccabees, 2 Maccabees shifts its emphasis toward the faith and piety of the Jewish people in the face of persecution. The author of 2 Maccabees stresses the importance of spiritual courage, presenting the suffering and death of the martyrs as acts of faith that are ultimately rewarded by God. A major theological theme in 2 Maccabees is the belief in life after death and the resurrection of the dead, a doctrine that is not explicitly addressed in 1 Maccabees. The book highlights the courage of the 7 brothers who were tortured and martyred for refusing to forsake their faith. Their steadfast belief in the resurrection and the promise of eternal life underpins their willingness to die for their faith. This stands in contrast to 1 Maccabees, which, while celebrating the heroic resistance of the Maccabees, is more focused on the historical and political aspects of their struggle. Additionally, 2 Maccabees stresses the righteousness of God's justice, particularly in relation to those who suffer for their faith. The author emphasizes that even in the face of apparent defeat or martyrdom, God's ultimate justice will prevail, and the faithful will be rewarded in the afterlife. This emphasis on the afterlife and divine retribution offers a profound spiritual message for the Jewish people, encouraging them to endure persecution with hope and confidence in God's justice. In summary, while both books share the same historical backdrop, 2 Maccabees brings a more religious and theological perspective, focusing on themes of resurrection, divine justice, and the importance of faith in the face of suffering and death. The differences in focus make 2 Maccabees a powerful meditation on the hope and eternal life that can come from standing firm in one's faith, even in the most extreme circumstances. 3.2. The story of the mother and her 7 sons, a heart-wrenching sacrifice. One of the most poignant and moving stories in 2 Maccabees is that of the mother and her 7 sons who face martyrdom rather than renounce their faith in God. This powerful account not only demonstrates their unyielding belief in the resurrection, but also highlights the extraordinary courage and conviction that can arise when one's faith is tested by extreme circumstances. The story begins with the king, anxious for Epiphanes, who demands that the Jews abandon their religious practices and adopt Hellenistic ways of worship. This includes sacrificing to the Greek gods, including Zeus. When the mother's 7 sons are brought before him, the king orders them to eat pork, which is forbidden by Jewish law. One by one, the sons are given the choice to either comply and save their lives, or remain faithful to God and face death. The mother is portrayed as a remarkable figure of strength, guiding her sons with unwavering faith. 2 Maccabees 7:1 describes how she encourages her children, saying, "I do not know how you came into being in my womb, it was not I who gave you breath and life. I am not grieved in my heart because of my son's fate. Rather, I rejoice with them for their courage and their faith." Even in the face of such loss, the mother's words reflect her deep faith in God's promise of the resurrection and eternal life. She believes that their sacrifice will not be in vain, as God will reward them for their faithfulness. As the story progresses, each son refuses to submit to the king's demands, and each is subjected to brutal punishment. They are tortured in front of their mother to pressure them into giving up their beliefs. Despite witnessing the horrific deaths of each of her sons, the mother never wavers in her conviction. She encourages her sons to endure, reminding them of the hope of resurrection. 2 Maccabees 7:9 recounts one of the son's final words before his death: "You are cursed, O king. You are cursed because you are trying to destroy us, but the God of our ancestors will bring us back to life." These words of defiance show not only the son's courage, but also his unwavering belief in the resurrection promised by God. The mother's faith in God's justice becomes a source of her strength. She refuses to mourn for her sons in the traditional sense. Instead, she celebrates their bravery and the purity of their faith. Her example of stoic resolve in the face of overwhelming tragedy echoes throughout religious traditions as a model of spiritual fortitude. She remains steadfast, teaching her sons that true victory comes from faithfulness to God, not from earthly survival. Her conviction that God will restore her sons in the resurrection becomes a central theme in the narrative. The mother's actions also serve as a model for faithful witness. She is not only a mother but a spiritual leader who helps guide her children toward their ultimate victory in heaven. As each son is martyred, the mother's example teaches them to die with dignity and faith, understanding that their suffering is not in vain but part of a greater divine plan. The story of the 7 brothers and their mother draws strong parallels with other biblical stories of faith and courage, such as Daniel in the lion's den or the 3 Hebrew youths, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, in the fiery furnace, Daniel 3. In these stories, individuals are faced with the choice of compromising their faith or facing certain death. Each character, like the 7 brothers, chooses to remain faithful to God, trusting in His protection and ultimately witnessing divine intervention. For example, in Daniel 6 verse 22, when Daniel is thrown into the lion's den for refusing to worship King Darius, he says, "My God sent his angel, and he shut the mouths of the lions." This divine rescue mirrors the hope that the mother and her sons hold on to, believing that, even in the most desperate situations, God will deliver them either through miraculous intervention or the promise of eternal life. In the case of the 3 friends in Daniel 3, when they are thrown into the fiery furnace for refusing to bow down to the golden statue of King Nebuchadnezzar, they declare, "If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it, and he will deliver us from your majesty's hand." Daniel 3 verse 17. Similar to the 7 brothers, their faith in God's ability to save them is paramount, and they are willing to face death for the sake of their beliefs. The mother's unwavering faith and her encouragement to her sons become an enduring example of sacrifice and resilience in the face of persecution. Her story is not only about physical suffering, but about the strength that comes from knowing that God's justice will ultimately prevail. It is a testimony to the idea that suffering, while painful, is not the end. For the faithful, it is a stepping stone to eternal reward. This powerful story in 2 Maccabees reflects the profound belief in the resurrection of the dead, a concept that was becoming more central to Jewish thought during the time of the Maccabean Revolt. The mother's sacrifice and her son's martyrdom emphasize that faith in God's promises transcends the temporal world, offering hope and redemption that death cannot conquer. 3.3 Miracles and Unshakable Faith, the Battle of Beth Zur. The Battle of Beth Zur stands out as one of the most dramatic moments in the 2 Maccabees, highlighting the deep faith of the Jewish people and their reliance on divine intervention during times of extreme peril. This story vividly illustrates how God's miraculous presence and assistance were seen as essential for the Jewish fighters' victories, even against overwhelming odds. As the Seleucid forces continue to impose their oppressive rule over the Jewish people, the Maccabean forces, led by Judas Maccabee, find themselves fighting for survival. The battle at Beth Zur becomes a pivotal moment in the Maccabean Revolt. The Seleucid army, far superior in numbers and strength, attacks the Jewish forces, hoping to crush the rebellion once and for all. However, the Maccabees refuse to surrender. Their courage is rooted in their unshakable belief that God will intervene on their behalf. In 2 Maccabees 15:21-22, we read a profound account of divine intervention. It is here that we learn of the appearance of the angel of God who steps in to aid the Maccabees during their struggle. The angel of God appeared in a dream to Judas Maccabeus and encouraged him with these words, "Do not be afraid of the enemy, but be strong and confident. For I am with you, and I will give you victory over the enemy." This message from the angel confirms the Maccabees' belief that their fight was not only for their survival, but was also part of a larger divine plan. As the battle rages on, Judas Maccabeus and his troops begin to gain the upper hand. The soldiers of the Seleucid army, though many in number, are thrown into confusion. The presence of divine power is evident as angels are said to intervene directly on behalf of the Jewish warriors. The divine forces seem to turn the tide, causing chaos and disarray among the Seleucid forces. According to 2 Maccabees 15:23, the enemy troops were struck by the sight of a divine force that surrounded the Maccabean army. This sight frightened them and led them to retreat, causing the Maccabees to prevail. This miraculous event underscores a key theme of 2 Maccabees, that God does not abandon his people, especially in times of trial and suffering. The Maccabees, with their faith, became instruments of divine will, and the appearance of angels acted as a confirmation that God was with them, guiding them toward victory. Their belief in God's protection and divine intervention was the foundation of their resilience. Despite the dire circumstances, the soldiers and their leaders continued to trust in the power of their faith, knowing that God would see them through the hardest battles. The Battle of Beth Zur serves as a powerful reminder that even when faced with overwhelming odds, the faithful can stand firm in their belief that God's protection is real and tangible. The soldiers' faith in divine intervention was not just abstract belief, but an active, living force that inspired them to fight with courage and hope. They trusted that their efforts were not in vain because God, who had protected them in the past, would continue to lead them toward victory. In many ways, this battle echoes biblical stories of divine intervention, such as when the Israelites were led through the wilderness by God's presence, Exodus 13 verses 21-22, or when Gideon defeated the Midianites with a mere 300 soldiers, empowered by God's assurance, Judges 7 verse 7. These stories share a common theme of faith in God's providence, showing that when the faithful align their actions with God's will, they become participants in his miraculous works. The miracle at Beth Zur also reinforces the idea that God's deliverance is not dependent on human strength or military might, but on his divine will and the faith of his people. The Maccabees' victory was not simply the result of strategic warfare, but of God's intervention and the unwavering faith of his people in the face of adversity. The miracle of the angel's intervention and the subsequent victory at Beth Zur is a testament to the power of unshakable faith in God's sovereignty. It is a reminder that in times of personal or communal struggle, the faithful can trust that God is present, working in ways that may be unseen but are no less real. It encourages believers to stand firm, knowing that their faith, when combined with God's power, can overcome any obstacle. In conclusion, the Battle of Beth Zur and the miraculous intervention of angels serve as a powerful example of how divine faith and protection can manifest in times of danger. It's a story that invites all believers to trust in God's constant presence, reminding them that faith in him will guide them through even the darkest of times. For general meaning and lessons from 1-2 Maccabees. For point 1, faith and sacrifice. The books of 1-2 Maccabees stand as powerful testimonies to the strength of faith and the cost of sacrifice. Throughout these books, we see how the Jewish people, under the threat of religious persecution, maintain an unwavering commitment to their beliefs and traditions. Faith is portrayed as a cornerstone for their resistance, not only in terms of religious practice but also in terms of a spiritual battle against foreign oppression. In 1 Maccabees, we observe the Maccabean Revolt as a direct result of the Seleucid Empire's attempts to force the Jewish people into idolatry, specifically by making them worship Zeus. For the Jewish people, to defy this command meant risking their very lives, yet their faith in God was strong enough to lead them to fight for religious freedom, despite the overwhelming odds. The book illustrates that true faith often requires great sacrifice, whether it's the decision to resist assimilation or even facing death for upholding one's beliefs. Similarly, in 2 Maccabees, the martyrdom of the 7 brothers and their mother highlights the ultimate sacrifice in the name of faith. Their story is not just one of courage in the face of death, but a testament to the profound belief in life after death and resurrection. The brothers' willingness to die rather than deny their faith is a powerful reminder that true faith often requires the willingness to sacrifice everything, even one's life, for a greater divine purpose. In both books, the message is clear: faith is not passive, it demands action, sacrifice, and sometimes, the ultimate cost. For point 2, connection to modern Christian faith. The messages in 1-2 Maccabees resonate deeply with modern Christian faith, especially in the context of resurrection and God's justice. 2 Maccabees emphasizes that faith in the face of suffering is not in vain, as it is anchored in the hope of resurrection and eternal life. This concept is a cornerstone of Christian belief, that death is not the end, and that God's justice will prevail, even when it seems delayed or hidden. The book's portrayal of suffering for faith also draws a striking parallel to the Christian understanding of martyrdom. The 7 brothers in 2 Maccabees who die for their faith in God mirror the experiences of many Christian martyrs who have faced persecution for their belief in Christ. In both traditions, martyrdom becomes a testimony of unwavering belief in God's promises and the ultimate victory over death through resurrection. Moreover, the themes of community solidarity and prayer for the dead found in 2 Maccabees have influenced Christian doctrine, particularly the practice of praying for the deceased and the belief in the communion of saints. Just as the Jewish people in 2 Maccabees pray for their fallen comrades, Christians today are encouraged to pray for their loved ones, trusting that these prayers can have an effect on the souls of the departed. Thus, the Maccabean stories of suffering and divine intervention resonate with Christian values of sacrifice, resurrection, and eternal hope, and they continue to inspire believers to live courageously, with faith in God's ultimate justice. For point 3, timeless value of the story. The enduring power of the stories in 1-2 Maccabees lies not only in their historical significance, but also in the timeless lessons they impart. At the core of both books is the idea that in the face of adversity, one must stand firm in faith and act with courage and determination. This is particularly relevant today as individuals and communities face various challenges, whether political, social, or personal. The stories of the Maccabees remind us of the importance of unity during times of crisis. Whether it is the unity of the Jewish people under the leadership of Judah's Maccabee in 1 Maccabees, or the solidarity demonstrated in 2 Maccabees through communal prayer and collective action, the strength found in community is a message that transcends time. Furthermore, the Maccabean Revolt teaches us about the power of resistance in the face of oppression. Just as the Maccabees fought to preserve their freedom of worship, individuals today can draw inspiration from their courage to fight for justice and the preservation of fundamental freedoms. In conclusion, the timeless value of the books of 1-2 Maccabees lies in their ability to inspire people, not only in times of crisis, but also in their daily lives. They encourage us to live courageously, stand firm in faith, and always trust in God's justice and intervention. 5. Conclusion, invitation for discussion. As we've explored the rich history and profound messages of 1-2 Maccabees, we've seen how the struggles of the Jewish people in the face of oppression speak directly to our own lives today. The unwavering faith, the courage to sacrifice for what's right, and the hope in resurrection and God's justice remain as powerful as ever. These books are not just historical accounts, they are a call to action for each of us. Whether we're facing personal challenges, societal pressures, or moments of doubt, the stories of the Maccabean Revolt remind us that faith can lead to freedom, even in the darkest of times. The sacrifice of those who came before us, and their commitment to preserving their beliefs, serve as an inspiration to live courageously, with a deep sense of purpose and conviction. As we reflect on these lessons, I want to invite you, the viewers, to think about how these stories speak to your own life. How can you stand firm in your faith when facing adversity? In what ways can you be a source of strength and unity within your community? And perhaps most importantly, how can the sacrifices made by those in these ancient stories inspire us to live with greater hope and courage in our daily lives? I would love to hear your thoughts, so please, don't hesitate to leave a comment below. Let's continue this conversation and learn together from these timeless lessons. If you've enjoyed this exploration of 1-2 Maccabees, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel for more content that delves into the historical, religious, and spiritual insights of the past. Share this video with friends and family who might find these lessons meaningful in their own lives. And, as always, feel free to reach out with any questions or ideas you'd like to see discussed in future videos. Thank you for watching, and may your journey of faith and discovery continue to inspire and empower you every day.